Earlier this week, Apple held a big launch event in Cupertino, well, virtually at least. And at that event, a whole bunch of new products were announced. You can click over here to watch our recap video. Unfortunately, noticeably missing was the iPhone 12, but that's okay. That at least gives us time to focus on some of the other products. And the most exciting, at least for me, and the most deserving of our attention is the new iPad Air. And I know it won't be available till later this fall, and I promise a full review video is coming your way when it does roll out. But in the meantime, if you are in the market for a new iPad and are heavily considering the iPad Pro, but then just saw the iPad Air and are like, which one should I get? Don't worry, I'm here to help. Hi guys, I'm MICHAELJOSH. You're watching GadgetMatch. This is our iPad Air versus iPad Pro buyer's guide. One reason that makes the new iPad Air something to look forward to is the fact that it brings a lot of what we love about the iPad Pro to a more affordable price point. For context, let's take a look at pricing. The two biggest takeaways here are the new iPad Air starts at $599, that's $200 less than the cheapest iPad Pro. But, and secondly, to find out how much cheaper the iPad Air actually is, we need to compare 256GB models, which is the only storage option that's available across all devices. At $749, the Wi-Fi only iPad Air is $150 cheaper than the 11-inch iPad Pro, and at $879, the Wi-Fi plus cellular iPad Air is $170 cheaper than the corresponding 11-inch Pro model. If you take a look at the space gray iPad Air and the space gray 11-inch iPad Pro, it's almost impossible to tell them apart except for the camera bump. They're both made of aluminum with flat edges on all sides. Now that I think about it, it actually looks more like the 2018 iPad Pro except for this flash module over here. It's sleek, modern, and premium. And I love it. Where the iPad Air has an advantage is that apart from silver and space gray, it also comes in sky blue, green, and rose gold. And that sky blue model has my name written all over it. Just in case you're wondering, the new iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro are almost the exact same size, just a fraction of an inch wider and thicker. That's why they share the same Magic Keyboard. Diagonally though, its display is 0.1 of an inch smaller. Not that it matters, I'm just pointing it out here because we're comparing. Otherwise, it's the same display tech, Apple's Liquid Retina technology with True Tone, which adjusts the display's colors based on ambient lighting conditions. It's got roughly the same resolution, but the Pro model's display is a tad bit brighter. But the one big difference is in terms of refresh rate. The iPad Pro has a 120Hz panel. Apple calls it a ProMotion display. The iPad Air has a 60Hz panel. This will affect those who intend on using the device to paint and sketch, or play games that take advantage of this higher refresh rate. For the first time on an iPad Air, users get support for the Apple Pencil 2, which I'm incredibly thankful for. This is without a doubt my favorite of the two Apple Pencils. From its matte finish to that one flat side, making it more ergonomic to grip. Also being able to tap to change tools. And more importantly, being able to snap it on to the top of the iPad magnetically. This gives the iPad Air an edge over the also new 8th generation iPad, especially if you're the type that intends to do a lot of writing and sketching. That said, as a byproduct of this difference in refresh rates, latency speeds are also different. If you recall from my previous videos, latency is that delay from the time you draw a stroke and that stroke appearing on the screen. On the iPad Pro, you get 9 milliseconds and 18 on the iPad Air. Still very respectable, but professionals who sketch, illustrate, or paint for a living will definitely want the Pro model. By the way, the Apple Pencil is an optional $129 purchase. And if you're asking me for advice on whether or not to get one, I say yes, this totally makes the experience complete. Especially now that you can scribble in text fields and it converts to text on iPad OS 14. The iPad Air has the same 12-megapixel wide camera as on the iPad Pro. It doesn't have the Pro's second ultra-wide-angle camera though. Not that big of a difference to me unless you plan on using this device as your main mobile camera. While we're looking at the camera module, notice the True Tone flash isn't there either, so no flash photography on the iPad Air. Also missing is the built-in LiDAR sensor, which elevates the augmented reality experience. This doesn't mean you can't use AR applications. It will work, and it will work fine. But do consider this if you rely on AR applications for a living. Since we're talking about cameras, both iPads have 7-megapixel selfie cameras for things like FaceTime calls. But on the iPad Pro, it's built into the True Depth camera system, that combination of sensors and cameras that are also on the iPhone 11 and are responsible for things like unlocking your phone using Face ID. On the iPad Air, and maybe more appropriate for this time that we live in, there's no Face ID, but Touch ID makes a return. But this time, it's built into the power button on top of the device. It's as fast and as secure as Touch ID when it was built into the home button. And to be honest, at a time where we all have to be wearing face masks, I'm happy it's making its return. This next part might get a little confusing, so pay attention. Okay, A12, A13, A14 Bionic chips. All of these chips power the iPhone, or at least the A14 chip will eventually power the upcoming iPhone 12. But because the iPhone 12 is delayed, A14 Bionic debuts on the iPad Air first. Now, the iPad Pro runs a modified version of A12 called A12Z. That's an 8-core processor instead of a 6-core processor like the A12 and A14. By adding more cores on both its CPU and GPU, there's basically more bandwidth for the iPad Pro to be able to do power-intensive tasks, like photo and video editing. That said, even if A14 is newer and more efficient silicone, A12Z provides more performance cores and GPU bandwidth for some complex tasks. In layman's terms, it really depends on what you're going to be doing with your device. While Apple is removing charging adapters from new Apple Watches, and it is rumored that it will do the same on the iPhone 12, the iPad Air, like the iPad Pro, will still come with one. Interestingly enough, it ships with a 20-watt charger in the box versus 18 watts on the iPad Pro. I'm not sure how dramatically different this will affect charging times. The iPad Air has the same 28.654 watt-hour battery as on the 11-inch iPad Pro, and Apple's promise of 10 hours of surfing the web on Wi-Fi or watching videos applies to all models. Finally, while there are 2 speaker grills on both sides of the iPad Air, it only has 2 speakers, one on each side. The sound flows through all of these grills. The iPad Pro has 4 speakers located on each corner of the device. This is where I'll need to test them to be able to tell the difference, but I wouldn't make my buying decision based on these differences. So, is the 2020 iPad Air or the 2020 iPad Pro your gadget match? If you plan on using your iPad for graphics or illustration, photo or video editing, and the kind that you do for a living, with the iPad being your tool or main tool of the trade, then I definitely recommend the iPad Pro. But for everybody else, if you're a gamer who wants to take advantage of its 120Hz refresh rate and don't mind the extra cost, then go for the iPad Pro as well. For everybody else, I say wait another month, or if you're watching this late, get the new iPad Air. It's definitely the most well-rounded and well-balanced iPad based on features that most users need. And I can see it being a hit among students who need a device for taking notes with a pen, but also using it as a makeshift laptop for schoolwork. I just wish it came with a 128GB storage option. That said, when it comes to storage, just get what you can afford. And if that's just 64GB, then that's fine. Just make sure to store your photos and videos on the cloud. Finally, Wi-Fi or cellular. Ask yourself, where do you plan on using your iPad? Is Wi-Fi at home or at school or at the office enough for you? Or are you the type who will use your iPad on the road? If you're the latter, then the cellular option is a good upgrade to pay for. And that was our 2020 iPad Air versus 2020 iPad Pro buyer's guide. Let me know if this video was helpful and which iPad you decided to buy in the end. Let me know in the comments section below, and while you're at it, subscribe to this YouTube channel, especially if I was able to help you out. Hit that bell icon so that you get notified every time we post a new video. Follow me on social media for all the behind the scenes fun stuff, and as always, make GadgetMatch.com your daily habit. Until the next video, I'm Michael Josh. Thanks for dropping by.